I know.
Children, great. That's not what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Should we get things going? Okay, see what you can find. Okay, turn it off. Thank you. All right.
Welcome. We have a round of applause. You start to see the crowd kind of mushing towards the tables. We're starting on my right, my food, and on the left, pretty much our desserts. So in about 4 meetings by 7. So we're getting in. Get the voters ready. The acoustics in this room are not very wonderful, so have no hesitation about moving forward. This is the size of the slide, so if you're having difficulty seeing, another reason to move up. But we want to get started so that there's plenty of time for our speakers and also for questions and answers. Our gathering tonight is part 3, I guess, of the events of this week. We want to take special note of the folks who walked from Ithaca and walked from Rochester. And to make sure that everybody felt right at home, we arranged that there was some snow this morning. So you saw Syracuse in its real-life persona. The weather is supposed to be better tomorrow. A little bit later in the program, we'll review what the schedule is for tomorrow. And I certainly would like to encourage everyone to see if they can hook into at least some, if not all, of tomorrow. It promises to be a moving day. And unlike much of what happens in Syracuse, not like Washington, we anticipate some fireworks at the end of the day, which are pretty exciting. One of the most satisfying parts of the planning for this week has been the creation of an upstate coalition. We have had people will travel for a number of meetings from Albany, Ithaca, Binghamton, Rochester, Buffalo, Utica, and parts in between. And the message that we began to send and that we will send loud and clear tomorrow is that upstate New York says no to the drones. We are very fortunate tonight to have two wonderful women to be with us, Kathy Kelly and Ann Wright. They have both been here before and have survived the wild northern weather of upstate New York, and we're willing to come back again. I think that is a measure of their commitment and the recognition that what's happening at Hancock is the eastern version of what's happening at Creech. We are known internationally as the second big place where the drones are growing. I would like to introduce Jessica Maxwell, who is one of the staff at the Syracuse Peace Council. The Peace Council has been instrumental in the organizing for tonight. The work of other staff, Andy Major, and especially Carol Bell, who is floating someplace. Don't know where. Okay. Jessica.
Good evening. I'm very thrilled to be here basically just to introduce our first speaker for the evening, who you've all heard her name already, and we're so excited. Such a stalwart, longtime activist for peace and social justice who's traveled to so many places in need, Gaza, Iraq, and most recently returning to us from Afghanistan. So pleased to welcome Nobel Peace Prize nominated Kathy Kelly to be with us.
But can I be heard in the back okay? Yeah. Great, and I hope I don't blast you out here in front. I'm especially happy to know that Ann Wright and Tarek Kopp and Lori Arbeiter could join us today, and we also have Brian Terrell, who very recently came back from Afghanistan, and I noticed Bernie Servo's here in the audience with us too. So it's great. It's a bit like when the Saints go marching in to look at this room right now. Thank you very much. I recently read an article by a Pakistani journalist who said that hunger and anger combined are like two live wires. When you combine them, there can be an incandescent flash, and it might be uncontrollable. And I think it's that sense of hunger and anger combined that is most informed experiences that I've had when thinking about the impact of the drones and other means of warfare in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. When Ann and I were in Afghanistan, and then Brian also in this most recent trip, there's a place that it makes sense to go to because we should try our best to make those who are the most impoverished be our top priority. And so in Kabul, it makes sense to go to a wretched place. It's called the Changi Kambar refugee camp. And this is a place, and Leslie's very helpfully going to be showing these slides. In Afghanistan, here's the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan, and then you have Kabul here. And there were people who lived in the Sangin district of the Helmand province. And they were goat herders, shepherds really, happy with their lives. They'd fatten up their goats and sell them, and sometimes sell yogurt. And when they sold some of the older goats, they'd get new goats. But as it happened, a person who might have been what in military parlance the pilots call an HVT, a high-value target apparently, came into the area where these four brothers had their very simple dwellings, and maybe the person who came into their area also appeared on the gravy screen of somebody who possibly at the Hancock Field, possibly at Creech Air Force Base, was assigned to watch, to track the movements of this person, because this high-value target was considered to be somebody who should be assassinated. And there's not a lot of questions asked once that decision is made, like who else is going to be killed when the Hellfire missile or the 500-pound bomb is fired or dropped. And so as it happened, these four brothers were in their homes at night, and all of a sudden a drone fired a missile into the place where they lived, and they couldn't wait around to see if this bloody thing would happen again. So when we entered into the Chari-Kamba refugee camp, little children went running to get their elders, and it kind of surprised me to see that the elders were about half my age. But I shouldn't have been so surprised, because the average life expectancy in Afghanistan today is 42 years of age. And so men who looked to me to be in maybe their 30s, but they were the elders, assembled, and one of the men, he was just so angry I didn't blame him at all. He flicked the decrepit blanket that was on top of a mud hut covered with a tarp. And as soon as he flicked it, the blanket immediately, in a puff of cloudy dust, ripped. The blanket was useless. And he looked around at this camp, and we knew that when the snows and the rain came, it would turn to mud and slime that would get trapped into these very primitive mud huts. So we knew also that the person who owned this stretch of land, where 1,000 families are now displaced, was an Afghan military man who actually was pretty generous in saying, okay, all of these new refugees pouring into Kabul can stay on my land, it can build huts, but he said no latrines. Imagine. And he didn't want new wells dug. Imagine. And so we could see the children, and many of them looking malnourished and suffering from respiratory diseases and a great deal of hunger. No fuel source. People were burning garbage. The smell from that was very acrid. And the man looked around and he asked us, do you think that we like to live this way? And I kind of murmured, no, I'm sure not. And then, pointing to the children, he asked me, do you think that we want this for our children? And then the next time that I visited, they took me deeper into this Chari-Kamba refugee camp. And by now it was really, really cold. This was in December. And I went into a hut, and I kind of huddled next to a small girl. And her uncle came and just unzipped the top of her jacket and pulled it back so that I would see that the drone had also crossed her arm. And next to her was her brother, an older youngster, maybe 19, 20, kind of writhing in pain. And his leg had been badly mangled in the same attack, and there was no medicine to help relieve his pain. And so the question, do you think that we like to live this way? And we're assured that the drones are so precise. We're assured that the drones are a much more effective weapon in order to accomplish goals. But we're not ever told, why are we in Afghanistan in the first place? And I think we actually are getting insights from General Petraeus if we start to read between the lines. January 19th, General Petraeus said, we've got our teeth in their jugular, and we're not going to let go now. Our teeth are in the jugular of Afghanistan. And maybe we should keep in mind 850 Afghan children die every single day. 1 out of 5 children in Afghanistan don't live beyond their 5th year. Our teeth in the jugular, $2 billion being spent per week on military occupation and fighting and bloodshed in Afghanistan. So there was a terrible 65 people had been killed. And General Petraeus was at the presidential palace in Kabul, and Hamid Karzai and his advisors were raising their grievance that killing civilians has to stop. And General Petraeus said no. There were only 7 civilians killed. The others were all insurgents. And apparently, from what I can gather, some of the other people at the meeting said, but General Petraeus, they're children. We witnessed the children with their limbs burned, their arms and their legs. And General Petraeus, inside the presidential palace, said, well, that's how the Afghan people discipline their children. They burn them. So then, on March 1st, children, little ones, were out doing what impoverished children do all across Afghanistan. And a number of us in this room have been so privileged to meet with some of these kids, the Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers. And they've told us, for instance, Zekarullah gets up at 2 o'clock in the morning, at least once a week during some stretches of the year, rides 6 hours on his donkey, loads up twigs and scrub-brush and branches that he collects from the mountainside onto baskets on his donkey, rides 6 hours back home, unloads it on the rooftop of his family's primitive dwelling, and year-round, that's their source for fuel. Well, this is something that's done by hard-working, sturdy youngsters between the ages of, say, 9 and 15 quite regularly. But in the province of Kunar, close to the border here, the parents who send their kids out to the mountain must be among the poorest, because they know it's getting more and more dangerous for children even to be on a mountainside helping find fuel for their families. And sure enough, on March 1st, there were 10 children spread out trying to collect the fuel, and they had just finished loading up in their baskets the twigs and the scrub brush they could find. And then all of a sudden, they heard a helicopter, and according to one survivor, a 10-year-old boy named Wahid, a United States helicopter came down low, and they saw a green flash. And the next thing this child knew, the helicopter, one by one, shot and killed each of the children on the mountainside. It's like the My Lai massacre. And this boy survived because a tree fell down on him. But it wasn't the first time. August 26th, the same river valley, almost the same mountainside, almost the same incident occurred, only this time 6 children were searching for scrap metal and hoping that they might be able to find maybe a landmark that hadn't exploded so they could get the precious brass. And that in itself was dangerous, but the greater danger they could never have guessed when this huge helicopter came down and shot them. What kind of intelligence are we getting when children can be killed month after month, week after week? General Petraeus apologized the very next day that 9 children had been massacred. He acknowledged, yes, that was the United States. Was it because there was a surviving witness? Was it because perhaps he'd been chastised for the insensitive remarks he'd made to parents before? I'm not sure, but on March 15th, 2 more children slaughtered in the same fashion. They were trying to clear an irrigation ditch. Children, tiny laborers, working to help their parents. And it goes on. Hunger and anger combined like 2 live wires. I was with Bamyan University students, and okay, they weren't hungry. As things go, they're probably doing better than most. But a young engineer looked me straight in the eye, and he asked me, Madame Kathy, do Americans care more about noses than fingers? And I didn't know what he meant. I looked at my traveling companions, I looked at the Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers, trying to figure out what can he mean, do Americans care more about noses than fingers? And then he held up a copy of the cover of Time magazine, and on it was the beautiful face of Aisha, the young woman whose relatives, the men in her family, were so angry because they said she had violated the sexual mores of their community, they mutilated her nose. And Time magazine, with that picture, gave a subheading, "This is why we're in Afghanistan." Well, when I got back to the Mary House Catholic Worker in New York after that trip, I had jet lag and I got a very early morning, got my hands on a New York Times, opened it, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, that's it. And this was the New York Times article that talked about a squadron from a Stryker brigade situated in Washington State that was going in front of military tribunals in preparation for a court-martial because in Afghanistan they were accused of having gone on a 3-month killing spree. And the staff sergeant in charge of this squadron had boasted that when he was in Iraq, he learned that you could kill civilians and get away with it. You could violate the rules of law and do so without any repercussions. Just find a weapon and lay it on the victim that you've executed and tell the story that shot at you first. Anyway, he gave all these stories and accounts of what he'd done in Iraq. Surely this young man had terrible PTSD, should never have been sent to Afghanistan. But indeed, they did go on a 3-month killing spree. And not only did they execute civilians in a planned way, but they would cut off their body parts and store them in jars. And so the ghastly question, which must be asked of someone like me, do Americans care more about noses than fingers? Are we ready to hear the reality of white-hot anger? And it's from that lens that I think we can better try to see what is it that the United States government is telling us. Now, President Obama has said repeatedly that the reason the United States is in Afghanistan is to dismantle and eradicate al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. But Leon Panetta, the head of the CIA, when asked how many al-Qaeda operatives are there in Afghanistan, answered 57. So we're spending $2 billion per week, $1 million per soldier per year in order to apprehend 57 al-Qaeda operatives. We can't make sense of it. So I'm going to ask Leslie to help me out by quickly going through in the next 5 minutes some of these materials. Here is Abdullah with poet David Smith Berry, so representative of Afghan youth seeking a better future. I'll pass out some literature, but please try to get in touch with the Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers. Bandi Amir, one of the most beautiful spots in the world, and this is the collection of youngsters who took us with tremendous hospitality to their wonder of the world, Bandi Amir. When I talk with the young women in this circle, I ask them, did you ever hear of a time when a passenger plane plowed into a tall building in New York City, and their faces looked so bewildered? They never heard of 9/11. Their young lives so dominated by 9/11. And this is the Chadikambai refugee camp. This little guy is actually giggling, but his father surely isn't. I actually have 3 more maps that I wanted to show you, and it's
in that one?
no, it's in a different one.
The next one. Sorry.
It's my maiden voyage with PowerPoint. I'm failing badly. But the other one that I wanted to show you, just as several other notes, I think it's important for us to recognize that every single day, coming up from the port of Karachi and from Gwadar, 7,000 U.S. trucks, 7,000, are driving across either the Quetta Passage or the Khyber Pass to bring into Afghanistan fuel, food, beverage, to make sure that the U.S. troops will be well cared for. Well, if you're a warlord and you're in control of those roads and you're not a fool in terms of economics, you're going to say to each one Taliban come in at night, charge a tide, and the U.S. soldiers and the NGOs wrap up and leave. So when President Obama says that the United States is making progress, his own national intelligence estimates don't go along with that. But as we keep on asking ourselves, so why are we in Afghanistan? This is a set of maps that was created by a CIA analyst. The map on the left is true. Pakistan really does share this long border with Iran. It really shares this long border with China. But Pakistan is the only country, the only Muslim country that has the nuclear bomb. The United States is clearly anxious about Pakistan. This analyst was wondering, would it be more in the interests of the United States if, you see on this right-hand map, it's his imaginary map, the Baluch tribes broke away from Pakistan and formed free Baluchistan and cut that border with Iran. And if Afghanistan could kind of arc over Pakistan and cut the border with China. And the next map is more irreverently dubbed by a journalist named Pepe Escobar, Afghanistan.
Yes.
November 19th, at the NATO conference in Lisbon, the NATO countries were exalted. The Asian Development Bank had said yes, signed on the dotted line to bankroll the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. Might this have something to do with why we're in Afghanistan? The United States, in a Cold War with China, even though we're interdependent economically with China, there's tremendous competition between the United States and China. Witness what will be happening in Africa and China's presence in Africa. Is it possible the United States wants to have control over the pricing and the flow of very precious natural gas and fossil fuels in the Caspian Sea basin, coming also from Iran? And if we could have control over the area where China would get its access to neighboring countries with these resources, then the United States would perhaps have more of a leg up in the future in relation to China. Might this be more of a reason as to why we must stay, rather than to protect the beauty of young Aisha? So we have a duty to protect. Many of you have been handcuffed in the process of this struggle to protest war. And I recall a time when a young soldier, I'd been handcuffed and somebody was kneeling on me and referring to me as an expletive, and I was hogtied for a while, really scared the dickens out of me. But a young soldier, when they took me to the next station to be photographed, gently squeezed my shoulder. "We're gonna get those cuffs off of you," he told me, "as soon as we can." That's the mantra I stay with. Get the cuffs off. Uncuff ourselves from this bloody and obscene war. Feel full force the sorrow of this war. Let our empathy spill over. Uncuff ourselves by saying that we will not cooperate. We won't tolerate. We won't consent. Volunteers who said so simply and so earnestly and so truly, "I want to live without wars." Thank you. Now, December of 2010, we were mighty pleased to welcome Mike Berner and Ann Wright, who joined a delegation that included Brian Terrell. And I'll tell you, you cannot find an easier, more enjoyable person with whom to travel than Ann Wright. And Ann was quite seasoned in her experiences in Afghanistan. She had, come up the back way, I'll open the curtain. She had been the person that the United States had sent to open up the United States Embassy in Afghanistan, but in 2003, when it became clear that the United States was going to go to war with Iraq, she so bravely and in an exemplary way resigned that post. And Ann has gone really from community to community across this country. And I certainly acknowledge also the fine work of Laurie Arbeiter and Tara Koch in this most recent effort. But Ann is somebody who I think has given us a model to strive for, of someone who keeps compassion, goodwill, good humor, and strength and intelligence all in balance. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. And what a tremendous, moving story that Kathy again has told us. Every time we hear from Kathy Kelly, she has been someplace. She has been doing things that we all want to do. And for those of us who are privileged and honored to be able to accompany her on some of the missions that she goes on around the world. In fact, how many of you all have been on a trip with Kathy Kelly? Raise your hand. There you go. In December of last year, I did go with Brian Terrell, who's right back in here. There's Brian right there. Yes. Brian and Kathy and a group of about 10 people were in Afghanistan at that point, 10 internationals with the Afghan peace volunteers, and then Kathy just has returned from a remarkable trip where she took 20. Kathy, how many people went with you? 28 people went to Afghanistan. And I'll tell you, when she cooked that one up, I was going, oh, Kathy, are you sure you know what you're doing? I mean, you're taking 28 people into Kabul, Afghanistan. I mean, there are drones there are suicide bombers there's everything that's there. And then I thought, now wait a minute, 8 years ago, where was Kathy Kelly as the war on Iraq, Bush's war on Iraq was? Well, she was sitting right there in Baghdad as an American with other internationals to say to the Bush administration, we are watching what you're doing. We are watching that you are bombing. We are seeing the shock and awe. So Kathy is one that, well, you better be careful when you go with Kathy Kelly, but you will come back a changed person. And the idea of listening to people in these countries, listening to people about their daily lives, listening to these Afghan youth peace volunteers where they want peace. They want peace in their country. Just after I got back from Afghanistan in late December, after I'd read the Afghan peace youth volunteers' letter to the world, to the leaders of the world. Now that's pretty presumptuous, isn't it? That little kids, anywhere from 12 to 18 years old, write a public letter to the world leaders saying, we want peace. And we want the warlords in our country to stop fighting each other. We want everybody in Afghanistan, and you, the Americans, and you, everybody stop fighting. That was remarkable. Very quickly, there was another letter that appeared on the international stage, and it was a letter from the youth of Gaza. Gaza, that place that Kathy Kelly was in January of 2009, right as she was there as the Israelis were bombing Gaza in that 22-day attack that killed 1,440 people, that wounded 5,000, left 50,000 homeless. She had been there during that. I came in about 2 weeks after Kathy had left. I and Medea Benjamin and Ty Berry of Code Pink Women for Peace went into Gaza. And we saw that destruction, that horrible destruction that 2.5 years later is still there. Well, the youth of Gaza in January of this year came out with a letter very similar to what the youth of Afghanistan said. It was that they were living under a horrible, horrible life, that they were being attacked. They had blockades around them. They were living in an open-air prison, that they had drones that were circling around Gaza. And when you're in Gaza, how many of you all have been in Gaza? 1, 2, I know Kathy has, 3, 4 of us. Well, please talk to everyone who's been in there about what you hear while you're there. And right now is a critical time for Gaza because the Israelis are attacking Gaza. They're attacking every day. There are drones that attack the people of Gaza. There are F-16s, American-made F-16s that attack the people of Gaza. We know that phosphorus bombs from the United States were used 2 years ago. These youth of Gaza, just like the youth of Afghanistan, are saying, we want the fighting to stop. And they call names. They say, we want Hamas to stop. We want Israel to stop. We want America to stop. We want people to stop fighting. We want to live a normal life. And the last one, the last phrase in their letter is that too much to ask? Is that too much to ask? That people have the right to live a normal life without war. And yet here we live in the United States of America, and you'd go out on the streets of Syracuse or the streets of most American cities, and you would not know that America, warmongering America, is at war. 2 wars, 3 wars, 4 wars. I mean, it just depends on how you count them out. We have 100 and some odd military bases, I mean, major bases. When we were in Afghanistan, we were told that there were over 400 U.S. military installations in just Afghanistan. What America is doing in terms of the largest arms seller in the whole world is us, the United States of America. We export death. We export death. And what we're here today and for tomorrow is another type of the death machine of the United States of America. Drones that are being made by the United States and being sold all over the world. And it's not just the U.S. that sells drones. Israel sells drones. Those drones that go over Gaza now will be going over Turkey. Interestingly enough, you know, last year I was on the Gaza flotilla, the one that got shot up by the Israelis. 9 people killed, 8 Turkish citizens, and 1 American citizen that was born close by here in Troy, New York, Furkan Duhan. Drones that are used by Turkey, sold by Turkey, drones from Israel that are purchased by Turkey. When that flotilla was attacked in May of 2010, there were Israeli soldiers that were in Turkey that were training Turkish soldiers on the newly purchased Israeli drones. Now, why was Turkey buying drones from Israel? Because they intend to use them someplace. How about on the Kurdish people in the southern part of Turkey? Kurdish people that on the other side of the Iraqi border, Kurdish people wanting to have a land for the Kurds. American drones going up in the northern part of Iraq. Israeli drones coming from the southern part of Turkey into that same area. The flotilla was shot up by the Israelis. The Israelis brought home their Israeli trainers from Turkey. And 10 days later, while there was still a big brouhaha throughout the world about what the Israelis had done to that flotilla, the Turkish government sent their soldiers into Israel to continue training on the drones in Israel at their drone base in the Negev desert. These drones are proliferating. When we were at the trial for the 14 people that were arrested at Creech Air Force Base, and how about everybody that was arrested there stand up? All right. Anybody else? I know those 3. I saw those. Those 3 out of 14 are right here in your community tonight, who stood out at the front gates of Creech Air Force Base to challenge what the United States is doing. I was honored to be an expert witness, so to speak. I was with Ramsey Clark, former Attorney General, with Bill Quigley, the director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and then myself as a retired military officer spoke at the trial as expert witnesses. I guess we weren't so expert, though, because they did get convicted. But we all get convicted, don't we? I mean, how many times? We all are convicted. And that's not the point. It's that these people stood outside there at that base challenging what the U.S. was doing with those drones and were willing to risk incarceration for it, arrest, trials, to get publicity for the fact that the United States is using these drones in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Yemen. They're using them in our communities, and what you are here for is Syracuse, New York. Whoever thought this would be one of the drone capitals of the world? Good heavens, drones here. If you go to Washington, D.C., next time you go down there for a march or a rally, look up in the sky, because there are drones that are above Washington, D.C. They're up there watching us. At the trial in Las Vegas last October or September, we had a presentation at the University of Nevada Law School. Tried a public event to get people in the Las Vegas community asking questions about why these people had gotten arrested at Creech Air Force Base. Well, after the presentation, members of the audience came up, and one man came over to me and he said, Colonel Wright, I appreciate what you had to say, but I think you're kind of wrong on some of your statistics. And I was, well, okay, fine. What was I wrong about? And she said, well, I think you said something, there are 20 or 30 companies that are making drones. He said, you are wrong. You are dead wrong. There are 475 companies that make drones throughout the world. He said, I myself make little drones. They're little drones. They are small enough that law enforcement people start using them in cities. They're small enough that now the CIA wants to start buying them to use them as CIA little drones. This thing that we're facing today, tonight and tomorrow, the drones right here in Syracuse, the drones that are at Beale Air Force Base in California, the drones that are flown out of Creech Air Force Base, are a part of the empire of the United States, a part of the death machine of the United States. It's a part of trying to rule the world and rule it so that we don't have to have what they call, the boots on the ground. It's dangerous for Americans to go to places. Yeah, it sure is. We shoot and people shoot back at us. So let's not put our own soldiers in harm's way. Let's do this all by remote control. So this is really putting our death machine by remote control. It's training these young kids on computer skills, as we tried to shut down in the Army Experience Center. How many of you all were down in Philadelphia at various times? There we go. That table's a good table. That one's a good table. Yeah, that's right. All of these things that all of the tables are good tables. But there's sometimes you have an opportunity to participate in some other things that others may not get to. And this Army Experience Center, a huge part of a mall, one of the most popular malls in Philadelphia, that the Army had spent, I don't know how many millions of dollars in redoing a part of that mall so it became a computer center for kids to go in and learn how to use machines, computer skills, so that they could fly drones, so they could drive tanks, so they could shoot weapons and see blood spew. That's what it's coming to. The U.S. military is attracting kids by these computer games. So we went in to close that thing down. There were 6 different times that people were arrested at that Army Experience Center. There was all hell breaking loose every time. Citizens were in there saying no to the Army and what they were doing. Do we ever have any successes in any of this? Every now and then we do. And there is no longer an Army Experience Center in Philadelphia. I say that there will no longer be drones in Syracuse, New York. Citizens are saying no to the drones. So it's such a pleasure to be back with you all here. I look forward to being with you tomorrow as we walk down the streets of Syracuse to say no to the drones. Then we go outside Hancock Air Force Base and say, Air Force, relook what you're doing. We don't want our National Guard of New York or any of the other National Guards or the Air Force of the United States of America or the CIA of the United States of America using these drones. Right. Stop the drones! Boat to Gaza, myself, Terry Koff is here. A lot of you all have been working hard helping us raise funds for the U.S. boat to Gaza. We now have purchased our U.S. boat to Gaza, and we will be a part of the next boat tour. And if you would like to have your words go to Gaza, we have postcards here. If you could just write some words to the people of Gaza, or if you want to write some words to the people of Afghanistan, you can write them right on these two, and we'll give them to Kathy, and she can take them to the people of Afghanistan. but please let you all, your voices be heard. Lori and Terry will be back here with cards like this, and we'd like to get them. Thank you all very much.
I'd like to have Kathy come back up as well. We're going to open it up for some question and answer with Kathy and Ann. But first, we wanted to share tomorrow when we march up to Hancock Air Base to confront what's happening there and protest the drones. One of the things that's going to happen is that we are going to deliver an indictment. And we'd like to read that indictment now, and we'll leave it over to the side so that you can personally choose to sign it if you'd like to.
It's entitled Indictment for Violations of Human Rights. We charge the chain of command from President Barack Obama to Secretary of Defense Robert Gates to Commander Colonel Kevin Bradley to every drone crew with the following crimes: extrajudicial killings, violation of due process, wars of aggression, violation of national sovereignty, and the killing of innocent civilians. We charge that these crimes are committed in violation of the Constitution of the United States of America, Article 1, Section 8.11, the Charter of the United Nations, Article 2, Section 4, the Golden Rule, and of international law to which we are especially bound by Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, which states, quote, all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. We demand that they immediately stop these crimes and be accountable to the people of the United States and Afghanistan. We appeal to all United States citizens, military and civilian, and to all public officials that we are required by the Nuremberg Principles 1 through 7 and by conscience to refuse to participate in these crimes, to denounce them, and to resist them nonviolently. And this is the indictment.
We charge that the Air National Guard of the United States of America, headquartered at Hancock Field Air National Guard Base, home of the 174th Fighter Wing of the Air National Guard, under the command of 174th Fighter Wing Commander Colonel Kevin W. Bradley, is maintaining and utilizing MQ-9 Reaper drones for use in combat. Extrajudicial targeted killings by the use of unmanned aircraft drones by the United States of America are intentional, premeditated, and deliberate use of lethal force in violation of U.S. and international human rights law. The U.S. has used drones for targeted killings in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, and Pakistan with no legal basis for defining the scope of area where drones can and cannot be used. No rigorous criteria for deciding which people are targeted for killing, no procedural safeguards to ensure the legality and accuracy of the killings, and no mechanisms of accountability. In support of this indictment, we cite the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial, Summary, or Arbitrary Executions, who has said that the use of drones creates, quote, a highly problematic blurring and expansion of the boundaries of the applicable legal frameworks, human rights law, the law of war, and the law applicable to the use of interstate force. The result has been the displacement of clear legal standards with a vaguely defined license to kill, and the creation of a major accountability vacuum. In terms of the legal framework, many of these practices violate straightforward applicable legal rules, end of quote. See United Nations General Assembly Human Rights Council Study on Targeted Killings, 28th of May, 2010. Cite a website below where you can find that. Let all accused in this indictment understand that our words are spoken non-violently. All are invited to stop the use of drones and to refuse to participate in illegal warfare.